I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming out on this beautiful night. Ugh. I know. We don't have anyone who's asked to speak on items that are not on the agenda, so we'll start right to the agenda. We have 2 sets of minutes tonight to approve. So how about a motion for the first one for the minutes of October 16th?
I move that we approve the minutes of the regular meeting of Wednesday, October 16th, 2019.
I'll second.
All right. So this is Joe, Sue, Lisa, and my, oh shoot.
We can't do
Can't
it?
do the second ones, because Matt left.
All right, well, we're advancing.
Oh.
We'll get the old one out of the way.
Switching it around.
Okay, so, well, let's do the October 16th one
Yep.
first. We do have those 4. Does anybody have any changes or corrections on that one?
I think we actually looked at it last time.
I think we
Did
did,
we?
we just realized we couldn't vote.
We didn't
on it.
vote,
Oh, okay.
but we talked about corrections.
Okay. I don't remember that we did. I thought we
Yes,
just.
I think we
Yes,
did,
we
because
did.
then we realized we didn't have the right people. That's
Okay.
why we
Yes.
couldn't vote.
Did I ask the question whether it's Elliott Landing or Elliott Boat Basin? Because I have that written down.
No, you did not. That's.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just didn't know. Do you know?
I just thought it was the boat basin.
So did I. I
Maybe
think that
you were
needs,
wrong.
I think that needs to be changed.
To Elliott Boat
Boat, Elliott Boat Basin.
Boat Basin.
Instead of landing.
But I'm sorry, what did you?
It's right in the report of the chair.
Okay.
Under the town officials meeting, Sue had reported
Yeah.
the renovations of Elliott, and it says landing, but I think it's actually called the Boat Basin.
I would have said boat basin, I think, because I would never, I don't, that's all I've ever known it as.
Yeah, me too. So I think that was the only change that I had.
Okay.
I must have missed that, sorry. Everyone? All right, if there's no other changes, all those in favor? So it's full.
Wait, there's something.
Oh,
in the
you got
student- Sorry, there's something in the student report.
Okay.
It's something under Sydney's. It just doesn't make sense. It says, Miss Page reported this Friday, both boys and girls cross-country teams. And then it says second 7. I don't
Ooh.
really know what that is.
Didn't they compete in the second 7 meet in Gorham?
Yeah,
If she had compete? Does that make sense?
yeah. Okay, sorry, maybe I was
Teams.
confused.
No, the word
Or
compete has to be in there, right?
Competes. Cross-country
Or
teams
competed.
compete second 7.
Competed, I guess, probably be past tense, right? Competed. Yep.
Yeah, competed in the
Second.
second 7 meet.
Okay.
Second 7 meet in Gorham?
In Gorham?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Remember, I had asked Sydney what that was.
The second 7.
So-
All right, is there anything else from either of you? No? Okay. All right, all those in favor then? And then we will table,
Wait.
Yeah, I can't vote, so I.
He can't vote.
I did, but I
Put
can't.
his hand up.
I
Okay.
just instinctively put my hand up, but I
straighten. It's
I
just,
still approve.
just the 4 of us.
Thank you.
And we will table the second one. All right, so on to the report of the chair. I don't have much to report on under me. Mr. Stanley went to the November 13th town officials meeting, so.
It was on the edge of my seat.
Can you give us a rundown? Is there anything new going
It
on?
wasn't a whole heck of a lot new that I heard. Correct me if you heard something different, John, but we talked about the budget season coming up and how everybody plans on trying to stay in that kind of 2 to 3% increase that's their normal target. Talked a little bit about road construction that's going to be going on out front here, and I guess there's going to be some period of time where 236 is going to maybe be down to 1 lane, which is not
Lovely.
ideal.
I hope they do it, early in the morning and in the late afternoon.
You made it sound like it was going to be for a stretch of days. So,
Ooh, boy, days.
So there may need to be some discussion of bus rerouting for a little bit there.
Yeah.
But that was really about all we talked about. There was a whole bunch of talk about the town medical programs that has nothing to do with us.
Right.
And I don't think it had
Their
anything.
decision?
Yeah, it's their decision, so. That was about it. Am I missing anything? That's pretty much what we talked about for
No.
about an hour.
No, that was
Talked a little about the aging population of the town hall employees, if that's a concern to anybody.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for attending. Appreciate it.
Can I add one little piece?
Yes.
The original meeting, our next meeting was scheduled for the 11th of December.
Yep.
And so I'm not able to make that because I'll be at the Alice training
Right.
at that time. So we've been able to reschedule that for the 18th, a week later on Wednesday at the superintendent's office at 8 o'clock. So-
Perfect. And
Okay.
Joe
Oh, okay.
is going to
Yeah,
go.
That's mine.
I was supposed to go, but we changed it all around at the last meeting.
Must have
So, but thank you.
Perfect. So if either one of you has work issues, I'm flexible. Like,
Okay.
I mean, I don't really want to go again, but I can if it's
I have a piece
necessary.
of paper somewhere.
So
I have my
do you,
paper now.
yeah, I'll say that later. I don't think we have done the next year yet.
Oh,
Maybe
okay.
not.
I don't
Maybe not, okay.
I'd be happy to take January. Ooh, actually, if I could take January, that would be good.
Sure.
Because I would be very flexible in January, because school's out.
The date of the January one is the 22nd?
Oh, is that right?
No, when do we typically do these meetings? Is it-
Second.
Second.
Oh, the 2nd, okay, so, oh, it would be the 8th then.
I have the 8th at LA Town Hall.
Yeah, if I could take that one, that would be great.
Okay.
So we'll at least have January covered, and then we can work on the rest of them after that.
Okay.
Does that sound good? Okay, that'll work out well. The only other thing I have on my report is a reminder. When Mrs. Sarabona and Mr. Zamaki were here last week, I said I would remind everyone about the Eat, Shop, and Walk at the Holiday Bazaar at the high school, which is December 7th. I believe it's 9 to 3, 10 to 3, something like that. We can get a more clarification on that, but I believe that's the time. So come buy stuff and do the history walk here at the high school. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson.
Mr. Cowley.
Yes, tonight we're going to start off with Heidi is going to present to us the Empower data that we took last spring and the SAT data. And then as part of that, Melanie Dodge is going to talk a little bit about data walls, which is kind of a data management tracking system for students that we're going to use, and so they put together a nice presentation for us. So I'll turn it over to the two of you guys.
Busy day for you, Heidi. Here we roll.
You get a gold star after the policy
Oh,
meeting.
And I got the audit submitted today. This has
Wow.
been a good day.
And your tires rotated.
Oh, no, that's another story.
Oh. Oops.
That did not go as planned. It was like no, we actually think we need new tires.
Oh, that's bad.
Yeah.
Spend $500 right now.
Let me see here. So, we had on the books to talk about Empower data and sort of data more broadly. So, really, my goal for tonight is to share some of the state testing data, but also to try to help all of us have a common understanding of the types of student data that we look at, and give you a sense of how teachers are using data routinely. The Empower data is that external dipstick, one moment in time, and I think what you'll hear when you hear Melanie and she shares what's going on with the data walls is that we're doing a whole lot more than that with data routinely. So the first thing, when I was putting this together, I looked back and realized it was about 5 years ago when I did a data presentation that I went through what the categories of data were, and I think it would be useful to review that. We have a lot of new people on the board. Excuse me. So there's basically 4 sort of big categories of data. So we have our summative standardized achievement data. That is your Empower Me, your MEA, your NECAP, your SAT. Those kinds of big tests. They're summative in nature, so they're supposed to measure sort of achievement of a particular standard. They're typically criterion referenced, so they are referenced to a standard, not to a norm sample. And that kind of data is useful for the 50,000-foot view. It's the big picture. Are we aligned the way we should be? Do we have gaps in our curriculum? Do we have grade levels outperforming other grade levels, right? Or schools outperforming other schools? Are there sort of big lessons that we can learn by looking at it. And then we have our formative standardized achievement data. So you're going to hear Mel talk a lot about this. This is our STAR test. Also, we used to use NWEA. That would be another example of this. We use a tool at the elementary level called the DRA, or the Fontes-Pinnell benchmark. They're very comparable tools. Those are considered a standardized formative measure. You can see I have sort of next to it, and the reason I put that there is because they are administered by a teacher, one-on-one, so there is a level of subjectivity there. The teacher is interpreting the standard, so it's not as clean and tidy as a STAR test might be or an E1. But what that does is those measures are used as a benchmark throughout the year. So every 8, 10, 12 weeks, a student will be given an assessment like this, and it gives you a measure of where they are at that moment. It's normed against other students across the country in some cases, depending on the measure. And it allows you to see growth over time. So when we use these formative measures like STAR, we're looking to see not only how well are students doing, have they met a proficiency benchmark, but are they growing? Are they growing as rapidly as their peers who started in the same place? Those kinds of things. So those are the two standardized measures. And then we also have our local measures. So we have formative local measures. Those are the things that our teachers are designing. They're taking time, say, on Thursday morning, they're writing common assessments, and it's really around local definitions of proficiency, right? Do we, as 9th grade algebra teachers, all define proficiency in the standards the same way, and how do we know that? So that's those formative local measures. And then the daily formatives are, that's what the teacher's choosing to do all day long as part of their lesson plan, their instructional practice. How am I reading my students? What's my dashboard? Am I using exit tickets? Am I giving quizzes? Am I asking for students to respond either orally or in writing to things? What am I observing as I go throughout my day with my kids? So those are kind of the 4 big categories. And I just wanted to put all that out there because I feel like because the Empower test is like the big flashy one that ends up in the newspapers, that when people think data, that's what they think of. And I think, and Melanie can comment on this as well, that in the last 5 years, our use of data as a district has just really gotten a lot more sophisticated. And the teachers are really thinking about data a lot more, using it to guide what they do, how they group kids, what instructional choices they make, and that's really the goal. So I'm going to turn it over to Mel and let her talk a little bit about the data walls, and yeah, I'll let you go.
All right, thank you. Thank you. So just a quick introduction. I'm Melanie Dodge Alcombright. I was a 3rd grade teacher at Elliott Elementary School for 6 years, about 6 years ago. And then I came back after a leave of absence for my son to our first coaching position in our district. And so I'm your instructional elementary math coach. And what I do is I help improve student outcomes and I help improve student teaching practices. And we do that together in a coaching model, right? When you think of Tom Brady, he has coaches for everything because he wants to make himself better. And so that's what the coaching model is. It's personalized, individualized professional development on district and school-wide goals that allows teachers to really reflect on what they're doing on a daily, minute-by-minute basis and think about, is that improving student outcomes? Is what I'm doing improving student outcomes or not? And part of that is, how do I know if what I'm doing is helping students? And that's where data walls come in, is they allow us to track our instruction and our assessment over time to see growth or maybe lack of growth, and to come together as a team to discuss those instructional problems. If I see this happening with my students, it's probably also happening with your students. Or maybe you figured this instructional problem out and I need to learn from you. So we get to do that because you've given us early release time every week where we can meet in professional learning communities to do that work together, to really create these common assessments, to create data walls, to look at student work, and to see, are students learning what we want them to learn, And if not, what are we going to do about it together? And so it's really about that day-to-day instruction, and that's what data walls do, is they allow us to track that growth and proficiency over time and see if we're meeting the targets that we've agreed upon to meet. And part of the data walls is the history of the data walls. We've had them for about 3 or 4 years now, and they've really grown every year. First, it was just a snapshot of 2 points in time. And then as you see here, they've grown
First
to
it
become...
was sticky notes.
Yeah.
They didn't want to put in electronic, well, first they didn't want to do it.
No,
Then
right.
they only want to do sticky notes, and wait till you see where we've come.
Yeah, so sticky notes, every kid's on a sticky note, their data's on a sticky note, so it's like this giant wall, right? So that's where we started.
That's funny.
I think you are sharing just your,
Oh,
I got it.
you got it.
I didn't go in and do the cast the desktop. No worries. I do this many times a day as I go from classroom to classroom. So. Okay. So this is just a sample data wall from last year, and I specifically used last year because I wanted you to see a whole year's worth of growth. Now this looks really confusing, but I'm going to break it down for you a little bit. The first step is deciding, based on, let's say, and what you're going to see in this data wall is pretty much 2 pieces of data, is that DRA data, that direct reading assessment. So it's a reading assessment our teachers give 3 or 4 times a year. And then you're going to see our STAR reading data. And that's a computerized assessment our students take anywhere from 3 to 12 times a year. And that's really dependent on how much we want to progress monitor them. If we have some kids that are at risk, we want to see how they're doing more often and see if what we're doing, our changes in our instruction, is that impacting their outcome. And so what we have to do as a team, as a whole building, as a district, is first we have to agree on, in the fall, what is average? What is far below average? What is greatly exceeding average? And we have to do this for 3 times a year. And so you can see this data here, but what was so important was the 2 years of conversations that got us here, of us really coming together and making sure that we're talking about all kids and what we can do to support all kids.
Well, and it's, what's important about what Mel just said is it's that common expectation, right? That we all define what that expectation for 3rd grade reading is, and we're agreeing with each other.
And what's nice about the walls is that we have all students go to one of the tabs, and then each teacher inputs their data in their own tab. So they get to look at just their classroom. So you can see that here. So teacher 1, we just pretended they had 4 students. And so they can sort now within their classroom. Let's say they just gave that DRA. And they want to look at this column of DRA. And I'll just go to the all student one. And they want to see, okay, I just want to sort by this fall DRA and see, all right, who am I really concerned about? And we color code this so it's easy to see right away. Ooh, I'm really concerned about these kids. The kids in the yellow, I'm a little bit less concerned. Kids in the yellow are about where they need to be, but they're not there with confidence. Kids in the green are exactly where they need to be with strength and with good skills. Kids in the blue, they're exceeding the standard at this point in time. And then you'll see some other data that we keep track of for ourselves and also for subsequent grade levels. Are they getting reading intervention? Did they go to the summer boost, which thank you for providing? We've actually seen amazing, not necessarily growth, but kids maintaining that end of year proficiency and starting the year there, as opposed to starting 6 months behind because they didn't have any educational experiences over the summer. Do they get special ed reading or math? Because if they're getting special ed math, that's a good thing to know even on the reading wall, because then I want to know, are there gaps? You know, is that disability preventing them from also doing something in reading? And if we can be aware of that as a team, we can address it. And then you'll see some of our schools use different instructional models. And if you use a flexible grouping model, where you might say, okay, so all of my red kids are going in one group, and they're going to have 1 teacher. But if you look at my green, yeah, but if you look, like let's say I have 4 kids in the red, 3 kids in the red, I might give them 1 teacher.
Yeah.
These kids I might give one teacher, and then I've got these kids that are really higher, they're gonna need less support. So they're gonna need that less intense intervention. And so we can kind of group the kids and keep track of, who is in what groups throughout the year. And we can talk about how the instruction in those different groups help to impact those students. And then we can see we have fall data, we have winter data, and we have spring data. Once the teachers put in their fall data, what's really cool is this column right here, this growth goal, automatically populates. Based on where a kid was right at the fall, if they made 1 year of growth, completely separate from proficiency at grade level, okay? If they make just 1 year of growth from where they are, what is that goal? Isn't that important for teachers to know as well? And so you can see what's really interesting here is you have kids who, you can see the red here, their growth goal was a 24 or 28, but that's not on grade level. But that would be 1 year of growth for them. And so you'll see our student who started at a 14 and ended at a 24 is still in the red because they didn't meet the proficiency, but they did meet their growth goal. They made 1 whole year of growth. And then you look at this kid who started in the red and they exceeded their growth goal. How exciting is that? They made more than 1 year of growth. And so having these walls enables teachers to track their students, to really see, is my instruction, my team, our PLCs, and how we're organizing our instruction, is that impacting students? And then we give them any other data that they like there. So star reading is another one. And then as we're sorting this data, we can see if there's any crazy outliers, right? So I can see a student here who's struggling, but by the end of the year, they've really made up some of those gaps, right? So you can see they started out in the orange here, moved into the green and yellow, and by the end of the year, they were where they needed to be. So it's a great snapshot in time. It's also so important, such important information for our 4th grade teachers to have when kids move from Elliott and South Berwick to a brand new place where no one knows them. I do, because I get to follow them from Elliott and South Berwick, and I get to be there for them in Great Works, and I get to remind that 4th and 5th grade teacher that this kid, we couldn't actually physically keep them in the classroom in kindergarten. Literally, couldn't keep them in there. Now they're sitting there, and they're doing their work, and they're reflecting on their work. And I get to that's one of the best parts of my job, is that I remember you when you were 5, and now you're 10, and look at how much you've grown. And so the data walls for me are really exciting, but I am an economics major, I am a geek and a nerd. I do love numbers. But I also, more importantly, love the conversations that we're having. We are not separate silos anymore. We are teams of teachers doing what's best for all kids, not just the ones in my class, all of them. And so that's kind of our data walls in a nutshell there. And what's also kind of exciting tool that teachers have is that, let's say I just want to signal out one student. I can pick one student on this separate tab, and I get a nice report on this one student. So I selected that one student, and now I can see in a nice report their whole data for the year, whether they met their growth targets, what their proficiency was. And for our reading interventionists and those people who have to do like our Title I reports, you get this nice data report that they don't now have to go and find the data from every teacher and go around and beg people for data and say, oh, I need this and I need this. Well, they have their data for their reporting right here. And that helps Heidi and our interventionists and anyone who has to do those kind of reports. So it's kind of those pieces of the tools that help us do our job better and really answer those PLC questions of, what do we want kids to know? How will we know if they've actually done it? What are we going to do if they've exceeded it or if they're not there yet? And this work helps to facilitate those conversations. Any questions about the data walls?
Very cool. Yeah, that's amazing. What grades does that go up to?
We do data walls for pre-K to 5. And I'm going to talk about the future of data walls in just a moment.
All right, thanks, Mel.
Yeah.
So that's when teachers think data, that's what they think about right now. At least our our elementary teachers. I'm going to shift over and spend a little time sharing some Empower data with you. I've asked, actually I didn't ask, Elaine reminded me that a printout might be a good idea, and so she was kind enough to make copies, and it might be easier to look at some of it on your handouts than it is up here on the screen. So I'm going to show you a bunch of different data in a bunch of different formats and kind of talk through how we think about and look at the data through some different lenses and what we learned from doing that. So the first two slides are some third grade data. And you actually have 4 years worth of data here, with 2018-19 being at the top and moving way down. The reason I wanted to use these is this is a screenshot right from the state reporting site that we go to. And what's cool about this is it shows you the 4 performance levels. So you can see what percentage of our students were exceeding the standard, meeting the standard, slightly below, or well below. And if I were to go into the reporting system and click on any one of those bands, it would bring me up a whole list of kids, and I could see the individual students. But this is helpful because, as Mel was saying, with our elementary work around data walls and intervention and flexible grouping, we've started to see some really nice acceleration, not only less kids in the red, but more kids in the blue, more kids that are exceeding the standard. And I think, you feel, that those high-end kids that were typically maybe flying under the radar are getting challenged in some pretty unique and powerful ways, so that's cool. So that's literacy. And then this is math. So the third grade math data was not as strong this year as it has been. And you probably already know that we have a K-5 math review committee going right now with teachers on it, and we're really taking a hard look at not only our data, but the curriculum resources that we have in place. What did we figure the other day? That we've been using everyday math for 15 years? 15 years. And some of the research right now is indicating that maybe it's not the best tool anymore. So we're taking a look at about 4 or 5 other possibilities, and teachers are going to dig into that. So stay tuned for more information on everyday math or something else as we go forward.
Just math.
So another thing that I've been doing since we've been using the Empower test is keeping my own sort of running graphs. So if you go to the next page, this is some 4th grade data, and I've kind of consolidated it. What the percentages mean is this is a percentage of students that met or exceeded the standard. So it's basically your blue and your green bars is what it represents. We're up here on the top, and the state is down here on the bottom. So you can see, so this darkest color, 66%, is the percentage of 4th graders that met or exceeded the standard last year, and it was 57% at the state level. We were 62% for math, the state was 40%. So that's a trend that you're going to see fairly consistently as I move through the different grade levels, that we tend to exceed the state average about 10 to 20% depending on grade level and subject area. So, I also included a couple of these. One of the things you might notice, I'm going to go back to this slide for a second, is a little bit of this, right? Like, oh, this group might be a little stronger, this group might be a little weaker, stronger, weaker. And sometimes looking at 1 year of data can be really skewed by the particular makeup of that cohort of kids. So statistically, it's more helpful to look at a 3-year average because it removes some of that cohort effect. So again, what you see here with the 3-year average is, again, we're about 10% ahead of the state in ELA and 23% ahead in math in the 4th grade. So then we have 5th grade. And again, this graph, starts to get a little messy because we're adding in science as well. So your ELA is in blue, your math is in red, and your science is in green. And you can see the this particular 5th grade cohort that was last year's 5th graders, this year's 6th graders, they struggled a little bit more kind of across the board. So their ELA, their math, and their science scores were lower than they had been in the past. That's something I would want to keep my eye on, and I'll show you a couple ways that we do that. One is that cohort 3-year average, and then another one is following this group of kids specifically. So I'll show you some examples of that. So this is the 3-year average for 5th grade. Again, you can see we're 10% above the state average in ELA, 13% above in math, and 8% above in science right now. So now we're going to have some fun. The middle school data is looking really exciting, and that is, I think, it's just a really good indicator that the K-12 program that we have in place is healthy, because typically what we're seeing in middle school is the opposite of what most people see. When you look across the state, and you'll see it in the state data, middle school data decline. Kids do less well in middle school than they did in elementary school. You can see the math scores for the state are below 30% proficient. And we were at 57%, so that's pretty significant. And this is a nice trend here, all the way up to 72% proficient from our 6th graders last year in ELA. You can also see, however, that the state as a whole did better. So that would indicate to me that maybe there was something about the test that was a little easier, or kids responded to a little bit more.
They don't use the same assessment year on year.
The same assessment, but different questions every year, yeah. So that mix of questions was somehow
A little easier.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is, again, why looking at 1 year is always a little bit suspect.
Sure.
So this is another way that we look at data. This is the cohort data, and this is really, I think, instructionally for us, one of the most helpful measures, because this is looking at a group of kids. So this is our current 7th graders. So this is my daughter's class. The blue is how they did as 3rd graders. Red is as 4th graders. Yellow is as 5th graders. And green is as 6th graders. So again, we've got some interesting stuff going on here in math. This 5th grade math is, we're seeing something across the state with 5th grade math being really challenging. But this is kind of cool. This is what you hope for, right? Like that each group of kids gets progressively better than they were the year before. So that's kind of neat.
Math is concerning. Yeah.
So, what's that? Yeah.
Heidi, you mentioned the, on the math for
Yeah.
the 52 across the state, but is the 57 too? I mean, do you think it's just something that's
So-
going on with
This
our
is-
kids or the test, or?
So I'll answer that.
Okay.
So this was their score as 5th graders, and this was their score as 6th graders,
Right.
right? So if I go back, you can see that last year, the state average of proficiency in math was 29%, and ours was 57.
Okay.
So that's
way above.
Way above, right? It's not as high as it was maybe in
Right.
past years, but it's still significantly above.
Above, yeah.
And if you go back to 5th grade, the state would have been at 34% that year that our kids were at
52.
52.
So still slightly concerning, but maybe not as concerning when you compare them to the rest of the kids in the state.
Right. Yeah.
What's the concern? I'm not sure I follow.
Well, it just seems like if they were 69 and 71 and then all of a sudden dropped to 52 and 57, is it, I think this may be a wrong perception, but I think kids get less interested in math as they get older a little bit, so that may have something to do with it as well, but I don't know.
But I would say that even looking at that data, just as we said, maybe the questions got easier in English and you saw that spike.
Yeah.
You look at what happened to the state average that year, I mean, it went way
Yeah,
down.
it plummeted,
And so-
yeah.
So we're part of that state average, you know what I mean, but
Right.
ours didn't nearly, you
Right,
know,
it's-
so there
yeah.
really is an ebb and flow to those questions, you know what I mean? And I think that, what we're talking about earlier, studying that data and getting those released items and those questions and figuring out where the subcategories are. But I think it's very, very important that you look at what the state as a whole did on that, because
Right.
that's a real good indicator of how everybody performed in that subcategory in those questions, so
So
that's
you're-
why I'm just,
So you're thinking it's more the test than our
I think
students?
so, I think that that's a part of it, I
Okay.
don't think that answers the whole question, because obviously,
It was clearly, I think, when they made the move to the Common Core, 4 years ago, there were some grade levels that really went through a huge transition.
Yeah.
Right.
And so,
So-
in particular, like 8th grade was one of those where the expectations really shifted, almost to what they were expected to do in 9th and 10th grade. So there's really kind of this realignment piece of now having the series of data to be able to now kind of change our instruction, be able to look at where those deficits are. So that's the work we're doing.
I always worry about just keeping, we always talk about, the importance of math and stuff, but I know and personal experience right here, as it gets harder, it gets less pleasant
So
to
that's
do.
what I was gonna say.
And I don't, and obviously I'm not a teacher, but, I hope, I think keeping kids excited about it somehow
Carrie, what you
is
say too is
part of
important,
it.
is that abstract math is hitting kids much earlier in
Yeah.
their math progression. I mean, I would go to the
Yeah.
professionals at that, but I mean, it isn't arithmetic through 8th grade anymore. I mean,
Right.
you're starting pre-algebra in 6th grade.
I was gonna say,
That never happened before.
I made it through 10th grade, but I think probably would fail out at 6 now, to be quite honest,
The sixth grade is
just because
where
it
they,
has
make
gotten
the
so hard.
Split, because in all the way up to 5th grade, everyone, at least when I went through, was in the same class.
Yeah.
And then in 6th grade, they split it up between
You've got all the different
the
levels.
3 levels, and so it was 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math, but we were all in 6th grade.
Yeah,
I
which I think is, obviously, I'm a huge supporter of that.
Absolutely. I think one of the other issues too is I think when Heidi mentioned the everyday math, we're kind of looking at that is because that's
Transition.
when really the math gets more difficult, and then as laborious as everyday math is, particularly multiplication and division, it becomes much more harder as the content increases. So I think there's one of the gaps where we kind of look at programmatically where we're at. So it really gets kids to be able to grasp conceptually, multiplication, division, but then to actually, in a practical sense, to have to do that in a timely fashion
Yeah.
is tricky. The lattice method is labor saving.
So
And
there's a couple
confusing.
other things I want to mention while we're on this math topic. One is, so we're comparing a 3rd grade score to a 4th grade score to a 5th grade score to a 6th grade score. So all these are different tests, right?
Right.
And you would think you would see something like this, but what I'm seeing and hearing from my colleagues across the state is everybody's seeing this dip in 5th grade. That it's something about the alignment with the 5th grade test is it's a much harder test. And our
Gotcha.
teachers talked about that when we had them do released items just the other day, that both the 4th and 5th grade tests were pretty challenging.
Do you get to see the questions or no?
That's
I'm
the-
sorry.
That's the $1,000,000 question.
I feel like I hit a hot button.
Even worse this year coming.
So the answer is sometimes. So we have released items, which means a subset of the test that's been publicly released with the answers and with how our students did on those released items. So let's say
Okay.
there's 25 items on the math test. They might release 10 of them
Okay.
and give us our individualized results for those 10 items. So that's super helpful because
Absolutely.
we can see which kinds of questions our students did well on and which types they got stuck on. They're not giving us those this year. They gave it to us last year, but this year they did not put it in the contract, and no one will tell me why. But they promised that we'll have it next year.
So you get scores
Because then
in
it's just a
isolation.
number.
Just inferior.
It's just, it's
Yeah.
just a number with no,
There's a little bit of information we can get. We can drill in and get sort of sub-score information, so we can figure out if our kids were stronger
they
in
break it.
geometry than they were in
So I was gonna
you
say,
know,
do they break
numbers
it
in
down
base
like
10,
fractions or this or
fractions
that?
decimals
Yeah.
or whatever. We can get that level of data, but we can't drill to the individual kid or look at like what was the most common wrong answer, what was tripping them up, which when we can do that, it's really helpful. So we're all a
Absolutely.
little annoyed that we
And
don't
I'll
have
go back
access to that right now.
Yeah.
12 years ago, we looked at the 8th grade, and because of that breaking down of data, we were able to see, holy smokes, 80% of our kids missed geometry questions. And we kind of went into, like, why did that happen? And then we came to find out from an instructional standpoint, we didn't get the coverage that we needed with that. So we needed to kind of reallocate our time to make sure the kids had the time to be able to get that exposure to those things, because that was kind of the last thing that was taught. And so as the school year kind of
Yeah.
wound down, you lost some time. So that was like a really simple way to say, hey, wait a second, we've got to look at time. But we wouldn't be able to do that now because the data is so spotty in places, so.
Yeah.
What time of year are these tests given?
So it's given, usually the window opens around the 3rd week in March and it stays open until April vacation. So it's about a 3-week window, usually right before April break.
So you still have maybe a couple months more of instruction. and
Yeah, and I actually have a letter drafted to the department about that. I've asked the question publicly in a couple of department level meetings about why are we doing this? There's not a school in Maine that gets out before June.
Right.
Why aren't we testing in May?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the kids can benefit from a full year of instruction. So I haven't gotten a good answer to that yet. The only answer I got was, well, then you'd get your data later. I'm like, it doesn't matter whether we get it in
Right.
October or
Does that
December.
matter?
It's
Yeah.
still
We-
the next year.
We didn't even get our data this year, remind them.
Right.
Just
You
kidding.
know, in recent
So,
times.
I'm
it
sorry,
makes-
I'm letting
it
you in
makes-
on my, like, this is the stuff I carry around.
It really does make more sense that we would do them in May.
Sure.
In the old days, it was filling in the bubbles. We all remember those?
Yeah.
The number 2 pencil, remember
Yeah.
that, right? We don't do that anymore. It's all electronic. And so there really is less of a reason why we
It's
should take these
instant.
things
The
so early.
process
and,
Sure.
you know,
Even bubbles and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
I mean,
That
it-
level.
they have had some significant issues with regards to the essay and getting the essay scored. We're not even getting writing scores this year because they couldn't figure it out.
They say 20,000.
but we did
20,000
did the assessment.
students.
We did do it.
Well, we did the writing assessment, but they're not giving us our scores because 20,000 student responses in the state of Maine were unscorable by their rubric.
And they were the high-end responses. They weren't, it was that.
They didn't fit their matrix, like the student responses fell outside of their sort of what they were expecting, so they were just giving them zeros. And then it happened so much that they finally were like, oh, maybe there's something wrong with our questioning or something wrong with our rubric, we better take a look at this. So it's good that they recognize that, but it's frustrating because if you think about the fact that we went from the MEA to no test for 18 months, to the Smarter Balance for 1 year, to the Empower, we've had no baseline writing data in 7 years.
Oh, my goodness.
So that's a thing.
The good news is that with the Empower has started to remain consistent, which is
Yeah.
huge. So we're not, we were, 5 years ago, we were test jumping, and then it became even
Right.
harder. So now we're starting to get some data that we can really get that 3 and 5 year window to be able to look at kind of the big picture. So that is a
Empower's been
positive.
in place for how many years?
This is the 5th year.
Oh,
So we've got
okay.
4 years of
Oh,
data.
right.
So that's good.
Yeah, that's good.
And is it given to everyone? Because I knew
Grades
there was one
3
like
through
3, 8, 11 or something at
That's
one point.
science.
Okay.
5, 8, and 11.
Okay.
But the Empower ELA and math is given every year in grades 3 through 8, and that's federally mandated that we assess kids every year from grades 3 to 8. So whatever measure the state would use, they would have to give it to those grade levels.
Okay.
So this is kind of cool. Our 7th graders last year hit 80% on ELA. I think anytime you hit or exceed 80%, that's something to celebrate. That puts us right in the top tier of student performance. I don't have the comparative data yet for this year, but in any past year that I've looked at, this is what,
Awesome.
so that's a really exciting number. Now,
Right.
obviously, the state did better this
Yeah,
year
exactly.
too, so again, that might have been a little bit easier test.
But you can see the correlation, how is the reverse correlation in math, you can see
Yeah.
the positive correlation in ELA.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's 7th grade. So again, this is our current 8th graders. So again, we're looking for that growth over time, right? So this is ELA up here at the top. This is one cohort of kids. 62, 62, 59, very tight grouping. And they went all the way up to 80. as 8th graders. No, 7th graders, they're current 8th graders. So that's a huge jump. They're also showing, you know, some holding pattern here, pretty consistent performance in math as a group. For 5th, again, that 5th grade dip, and then 6th and 7th. Sorry if you guys don't like charts, I'm just apologizing.
No, I love charts.
No, they're awesome.
So cool. Just takes a minute to.
It's a lot, which is, yeah, which is why if you have questions and go and look at it again, just let me know. So this is our current freshmen, our last year's 8th graders. There's a lot of happy stories in this. I just want to point out how much this group of 8th graders outperformed their previous year's 8th graders in every way. So our ELA was at 78%, math was at 61%, and science right here, I just have to give a shout out to the middle school science teachers, 92% proficient. I've not seen a proficiency rate that high.
Wow.
And you know what that means? There were 12 students in last year's 8th grade class that didn't meet the science standard. 7 of them were special ed, and 3 of them missed it by 1 point.
Wow.
You can't do better than that, in my opinion. Like,
It's amazing.
it's really
How about
good.
that middle school, huh?
So that's just something to be happy about.
Yes, for sure.
And then, so then we have this weird thing where we don't get any data for a couple of years, and then they take the SATs.
Yeah.
So the good thing about the SAT is it's a consistent thing. It's nationwide. It's comparable across state to state to state. But the bad thing about the SAT is it's technically an aptitude test. It's not an achievement test, so it's not as sort of standards-based or criterion referenced as our state test is. Nonetheless, it's useful data for us to look at. Since I've been here, I've not really seen a great deal of change in our performance on the SAT. It's pretty consistent in the sort of mid-60s to mid-70s range in ELA, in the sort of 50 to 60% range in math, and in the, usually in about the 50 to 60% range in science. And we're still right in those ranges. You can see the state is also incredibly consistent in their performance, again, because the test hasn't changed. So we do quite well comparatively. Again, we're outperforming by 10 to 20 percentage points. Maine does have a different, when you analyze SAT results from Maine, you do have to consider that our sort of state average SAT scores include all students. Whereas when you look at, because it's our state test for 11th grade, when you look at other states, it only includes the students who chose to take the SAT. So typically it's your college-bound kids. So if you were to say compare Maine's average SAT scores with Michigan's, it might look like Michigan kids were way smarter, but it's just that a different population of kids took the test. Is your question, Katie?
Yeah, how is there a science score? Is this just based on the SAT?
No, so the science, that's a great question. So in Maine, because it is our state test, and it's supposed to be assessing our state standards, they've created a science augmentation test, which kids take in 7th.
Oh,
So this, in 11th grade.
Yeah.
So that's the science test that's given a little later than the
Yeah.
SAT. It's just the
Yeah.
1 or 2 days, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yep, so that's not actually part of the SAT, it's a separate test.
The acronym is also SAT, though.
What's that?
Science Augmentation Test.
Right.
Also SAT.
SAT.
Yeah.
So how do you translate SAT scores into percent proficiency?
So because it's used as a state test, thanks
Yeah.
for asking that question. Because it's used as a state test, it's supposed to be a summative measure of our standards. So the state had to set
Okay.
achievement
Yeah.
bands, basically.
Got
It was funny. Somebody asked the question, I was at state training for the Empower test yesterday, and we were looking at data, and someone asked the question, well, how can, if this is the state average, how can it be below expectation? And they were like, because the state average score is below what our expectations are
Yeah.
for performance, for proficiency. So yeah, so it's a translation of a score range to a particular performance level.
But you do have, comparisons to other states that actually use that as their growth measure? Or they-
SAT?
Yeah.
I don't know of another
It'd just
state
be
that
nice
gives
to
it statewide. I mean, it's an interesting question.
But that's always interesting to understand that, because when they get in these national numbers, and then
Rankings.
Maine falls, 49th.
Right.
You have to understand, you know what I mean, how we're using these
Right.
tests, you know what I mean, and what you're comparing them to, John Q. Citizen might just throw these numbers up there and say, well, Massachusetts does so well. Well, yeah, because it's just the kids that are planning to go to
Yeah,
college,
college
and the other
bound.
students don't take it, you know what I mean?
Right.
But ours take them, so you have to dig deeper into the data, as you say, you know what
Yep.
I mean, to really understand what it shows,
Right.
And
In 2016, the SAT changed, so I don't know which.
You went back.
Yeah, it changed, they changed the writing and they augmented some sections in Maine and across the country. So the Maine version, the school day version of the SAT has I guess a couple components that maybe aren't in the regular one to meet this federal guideline for accountability.
Yeah, I think some of the scoring or the strategies that you would use, guessing is good. And
Right,
that kind of
yep. And the thing about the SAT too is people think of it as a sort of math and science test, but it truly, science and historical knowledge is so important on this test, and the ability to, they get a score for reading and analyzing science and reading and analyzing historical text, and they are asked to read a lot of graphs and charts and work with data, and they're asked to read a lot of sort of primary source documents and be able to, work with those proficiently. So that's something I really hope our teachers understand, is that it's not just about math and ELA for success on the SAT. It really is, all of those content areas are important. So that's a whole lot of charts and data. This is a 3-year average for the SAT, which again kind of takes that cohort effect out. You can look at ELA, math, and science, and again, you see that same trend of 10 to 20% of an outperformance margin, which is great. I do think it's important to recognize how well, even though 52% is our lowest percentage up here, it's the one by which our students far exceed to state in terms of math. They really do quite well comparatively. So then the big question we have to come back to is, why do we look at all of this? Why does Heidi make these crazy charts? And what does it tell us? And I think it's what kind of next steps do we see? You heard me talk about a couple of them. The third bullet down there, taking a hard look at that math curriculum K-5 and making sure that it's really setting kids up to be successful in the illustrative math program when they get to 6th grade. Continuing to provide instructional coaching. Another piece of the puzzle for all of this is our elementary teachers are not specialists. They teach everything every day, right? They're teaching math, science, social studies, literacy. And when we get to middle school and high school, we have expert people who maybe got their degrees in math, or they got their degree in science, or they got their degree in literacy, and they're much more specialized and they have more of a base to draw upon. So that's why Mel's expertise as a math coach is so important, because she can really build that for our elementary teachers. Math is the least likely focus area for an elementary teacher, typically. The other thing, I think, particularly when you think about the data walls and everything that Melanie shared, one of the hopes that I have is that we really continue to look at our RTI program and refine what we're doing at the pre-K5 level. Mel mentioned it, and she could talk a little bit more about her goals around math, because those are really literacy focused now, and how can we do what we're doing for kids in literacy also in math. I mean, we have our data walls around math, we have reading intervention, we have summer boost, it's all focused on reading. We don't have those structures in place for math. And that's something, I think that's a place for us to grow. And likewise, I think that our middle school and high school teams could learn something from our elementary teachers in terms of the way that they look at data and use it to drive instruction. And I'd love to work with them to figure out ways to do that in manageable, useful ways. I actually had a great unsolicited meeting with the high school math department last week. They called me up and said, we want to know about the STAR test. What's that? And how can it help us? So Peter Ryan and I went over there and met with them, and they were really interested. And I think a couple math teachers are going to try it out at the high school level this year so they can start to get some of that formative data, which is great that they're asking for it. That's the right question. And for me, what it really comes down to is that our teachers aren't teaching to any test. If we're doing our job right and we have a good, solid, rigorous K-12 program, any kid, any test, any day, right? Our kids should be able to be successful. Mel, did you want to say a couple more things?
Yeah, and so kind of the next steps for the data walls is now let's take everything that we focused on in literacy and let's apply that in math. And so last year we spent all year, I met with every grade level, pre-K to 5, multiple times on developing is what is the top 5, that non-negotiable skills, procedural fluency, that every kid needs to know by the end of 1st grade, by the end of 3rd grade. This is a non-negotiable, every kid. Not only of the skills and procedural fluency, but conceptual understanding, right? So understanding place value as grouped by tens versus being able to add a 3-digit number. So I need a skill and I need a conceptual understanding of what that number means in that place value. And so after that year of meetings and really refining what's important to us, we took a look at the focus standards for the Common Core. What does the Common Core say we should be focusing the majority of our time on? What does everyday math say that we should be focusing our time on? When we did our report card committees a few years ago, what did we decide was the most important to report out to parents? And then we took all of that work and we decided on what are our top 5 for our data walls at every grade level. And so those have been rolled out this fall, and teachers are just providing kind of little bits of feedback. And now our work is around, are we assessing these skills in the same way? Is our expectation at the end of that one assessment the same? Am I grading my student who performed exactly the same on this test as your student the same as how you graded it? So what the data walls enable us to do is they enable us really to have that starting off point of this is what we agree upon. This is what we hold most dear in our instruction. This is what we're going to assess. This is what we're going to report on. And then it's all about the conversations and the professional learning community work that goes around trying to decide how are we going to do that together? How are we going to maybe flexibly group these kids so that so those kids that are really struggling get 90 minutes of one-on-one on small group time, and my kids who are flying can really extend their knowledge in a new way with a little bit more independence because they don't need that one-on-one intervention right now. And so I can't tell you how excited I am about this math committee work and these math data walls. I don't know that everybody else is excited as me, but it's just amazing to see when I came here 12 years ago and how we were silos and everybody did their own thing. And to see where we've come to in our elementary schools now, you have people talking all the time and looking at student work that never even occurred to them to happen before. And so just big kudos to the teachers to putting all their data on a wall for everyone to see, right?
Yeah.
Think about how that feels. Do you want the evaluation of your work being up there for everybody to see? So even just that step is really big. So kudos to them. Thank you to all the support that you give us to do that, the PLCs, the Summer Boost. Thank you.
So-
Your energy is so contagious. I'm like, I want to be that excited about math.
So
So it's great.
one of the things you notice on the chart is also work to refine the RTI process, which is the response to intervention work, which is for the struggling learners. And so this will shock you tremendously, but I've asked Heidi and Mel to be the chairperson for our district-wide overhaul of that program. So in the next month or so, we'll begin diving into kind of creating a systematic process, K to 12, to really kind of look at the student data and then look at what kids are doing and be able, how do we use that to be able to give students what they need. So they do a great job. Excited.
As we look ahead, do either of you, and maybe Melanie specifically, think that math boost for the summer?
Well, so one of the things that has been a part of the boost is kids have had access to the everyday math games, and so that's sometimes been a center during their boost. So they have had some math and but in more of a playful way of practicing really procedural and fluency skills in that boost. I think that we could definitely do that for the future.
Boost up the boost?
Yeah,
To
boost
include
up the math part of the boost for those kids who need it as well.
I mean, there's this sort of working theory in early elementary that you have to focus on literacy, that like reading is the holy grail,
Right.
and that if we build kids' literacy skills, that's also going to support their learning in math, because it doesn't matter what math program we use, they're all language-based. They're all, kids have to be able to read problems and decipher them and pull out what's important, and so those, understand math vocabulary, like all that
Right.
stuff's really important. That doesn't mean we don't need better number sense and more fluency among our students. We do need all that stuff. But I think that one of the struggles I see, and I can see the story sometimes in the data, is we shine a bright light over here on our literacy practices, and we're putting so much energy into flexible grouping or into changing the way we do intervention that we're not meaning to, but maybe we're paying a little less attention to math, right? So it can swing.
I think what I heard, one of the most important things you said, Mel, was that we're going to be able to say that all first graders must know this in mathematics. All second graders must know that, and that clarity is huge. I mean, there was not too long ago where you would get kids coming to different schools, and you would, from the same grade level, and they would be, if there's 12 chapters to be done, some would have 12 done, some would have 11, some would have 6, and so that we lose that consistency. So I think once we establish that these are the non-negotiables, this is what all students will be able to do, that enables us to set a standard to build all of our instruction around, which I just think that's the biggest step that math committee is going to be taking. So, yeah.
Well, I would encourage you, as you're designing summer, to just take a look and, before we get to budget season, and see what we can do. Whether there's just like a little cohort that does math and a little reading, and the other one does reading and a little math. So.
And often it is the same kids that need both, but not always.
Yeah. No, it's not always. I mean, we know you can be really strong in one and really low in the other, and it's the same child.
Amen to that.
Yeah, we understand that completely.
That's why Ryan's number things.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Very interesting. Very, very.
Thank you
very
for allowing
exciting.
me to do a job that I just love.
Yeah. And we're glad about that.
Yes.
You were an awesome third grade teacher, though, too. Yes. So that's all I got to say.
Yes.
You guys can stay or you can go. Now, if you want to stay, but if you want to.
I've already missed bedtime.
Okay, so you might as well hang with us.
Exciting.
The next thing on the agenda is just really recognition of the girls cross country team who won the Class A South Maine Principal Association Sportsmanship Award, which is always a great honor.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Coach Kent Sanzone.
That's
and the
a
entire
nice
team.
award.
Yeah, very, very nice. And they were recognized recently at halftime of the football game to receive that award. So
Wonderful.
it was really nice.
Congratulations.
Awesome. Congratulations. And
Does
a
that
great
mean
year.
no tripping? You guys weren't? I'm just kidding.
Didn't get caught.
Didn't
Or
get
taunting.
caught. No, I'm just kidding. I know it means so much more than that. Really, just joking.
And that's the end of my report. I turn it over to students.
All right, well, our report's kind of short tonight, but, so you guys were talking about this earlier, but Mary Poppins, they have, some shows coming up. So they obviously had their shows last week and that went really well. And tomorrow they have a dress rehearsal that's open to the public and it's free. So if you want to see Mary Poppins, I think that for this one, Miss West, she's like allowed to like intervene and like actually like talk to them and stuff like that. But it is gonna be like the play, so if you want to go see it for free, you can go tomorrow. But they also have shows on this Friday at 7, and on Saturday they have a matinee at 2, and they also have a show at 7. And the play stars seniors Lily Whalen and Jason Glidden. And I haven't seen it yet, but I've seen the preview, and it looks really good.
It's
I'm
fabulous.
definitely going
Fabulous.
this weekend.
It was great.
For sure.
For the record, Jason Glidden's Cockney accent is better than Dick Van Dyke's.
Oh.
Let that known.
He
widely.
was very good.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
such a good actor.
It was-
Maybe it's a low bar, okay.
Yeah, it was really outstanding.
And then also, Interact has some things coming up. So they have a food drive going on at the Holiday Bazaar. So anyone who's going to the Holiday Bazaar, they can bring in cans. We're also going to reach out to Vicki Stewart so that she could get a Facebook announcement out there. But we're hoping that this can add on to our Christmas donation. There's also going to be a donation jar along with the cart with the food and the cans. So if anybody like forgets a can or just wants to donate, they can donate to Interact Club, and it'll go to something that we do like Crossroads or some sort of donation. And then we're also going to try to continue the food drive at the high school because we had it for Spirit Week, and we want to continue it so that we have a Christmas donation. Then there's also the Interact Club's doing the winter coat drive, which we're hoping to start after we come back from Thanksgiving. So kids and students kids and teachers can donate coats that will go to they will go to Project Community, which it's out of Sanford, and it's this group who are working to support social justice through education service and art, and the coats are just going to provide warmth to those in need of them. And we're also interested, we wanted to reach out, we're just getting this rolling, but we were interested in having one at the middle school too. But we're going to talk about that tomorrow at our meeting. But it's definitely happening at the high school, so if you know any high school students or if you go to the high school, please bring in some coats because they'd be needed. It's probably going to go from about after Thanksgiving when we get back till about midterms, which is the week of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So, yeah.
People are cleaning their closets out right now, switching things over.
Yeah.
So I wonder if Vicki could get a notice out to the community, because I think a lot of people, so long as they knew about it, would be so happy to drop.
Yeah, and we want to do it. We definitely wanted it to go after Christmas because a lot of people like get coats or they get clothes or something for Christmas, and so maybe they get a new coat and they don't need their old coat anymore, so they can donate that.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, that's it for me.
Okay, so all sports are over except for football. And so football won regionals last week versus Kennebunk, and they will play Brunswick at States this Saturday at Fitzpatrick Stadium in Portland on Saturday at 6. And so all the winter sports have started pretty much. So that's indoor track, boys and girls basketball, wrestling, hockey, and ski team starts next week, but it's like pretty much started. And then math team is doing really well this year, and they're in second place right now in Class A South. And junior Owen Byrne, he got a perfect score at the last meet, which is like really crazy.
That's wonderful.
Wow. And for student government, we've been working on like a lot of different projects in all the committees, but we're currently like focusing on a slideshow that's going to be presented to the students to kind of like inform them about student government and hopefully get more people to be involved in it. And Mr. Scola came to our last meeting and he helped us with that. So yeah.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is that it? All right. Correspondence, we have none tonight. So on to the report of the committees. Finance and Facilities met prior to this meeting. Joe, do you want to do the number?
I can give it my best shot. So,
Okay.
cash flow wise, we're still running a little bit below where we want to be. Expenditures are slightly ahead of budget and ahead of revenue as well. There was a Rollins for payment that didn't make it into the October number, which was a part of that. There was also a bunch of projects that got done that were front-loaded in the budget. Things like the Great Works roof, the copier payment, the EES boiler payment, paving at 2 of the schools, MMS Middle School and LA Elementary, and the time management software. All that was kind of front-loaded in the expenditures. So we're down below $1 million in terms of cash on hand, which is still enough to make an additional payroll, but we're expecting that to bump up back to where it belongs in the coming months, and we have a view toward actually finishing the year with a surplus, as was predicted at the start. So it's a very temporary situation, not even a problem really, but yeah.
Perfect. Does anybody have anything to add? I don't think I do. So do you want to do facilities?
I'll try.
Okay.
So we have a few repair issues with facilities. There's a problem with the heating at MMS, and the control panel and sensors need to be replaced. About $14,000, and hopefully that'll be done as soon as possible. There's a roof repair that needs to be done here at the high school, also pretty time sensitive. You have to repitch and fix the membrane because there was water pooling in one area, and it's creating a problem. We need to have brick sealing done at all the schools because water can seep through, which kind of gives that whitish stuff on the inside of the brick, especially in shady areas. And it means that moisture is penetrating. So it's not such a good thing. And it's costing just under $1 a square foot, and hopefully we're going to be able to learn how to do it when the initial people do it. Fingers crossed, that'll save us a few bucks. And yeah, that's minor paving at the Great Works parking lot. It's a big pothole, I guess. And was there paving somewhere else or something?
They filled a pothole at EES.
Coal patch,
Coal patch
Yes.
at EES.
Yes.
That one.
Yep.
Okay.
And as far as transportation goes, the new buses are in and paid for. We are fully staffed for drivers. Yes. But we still have no mechanics. So we have budgeted 2 mechanics. We don't have any. We're going to some expanded research engines to hopefully get somebody. So if anybody knows a bus mechanic, let them know. And as far as food service, it's pretty much status quo. We're within $200 of where we were last year. Right on the money. I think that's about it. Anything we missed? No? All right. Ed policy, we met today. Lisa, you want to?
Oh my goodness, I don't have my notes with me, but
That's okay.
we went through
I
a
can-
slew of policies.
That's about what I was going to say.
That's pretty much it, right?
And we will
it
have,
wasn't too
I
complicated.
think, 4 for next meeting for first read. There's been some changes in the law as to the definition of gender identity. And so that affects several policies needing to add that legal explanation of gender identity into several of our policies. So we will have all of those for you. Some of which you
I'll
have.
be there next Wednesday and we can talk about it.
Some of which you just saw recently.
Yeah.
Right, like within the last
Amazing.
couple months.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just really to add those pieces to it. So, and we meet, I don't know, in a month before Christmas. So we'll move on to new business. Can we have a motion for the donation of $750 from Unum?
I move that we accept a donation of $750 to the Marshwood Great Works School from Unum of South Portland.
A second. And second from Sue. Is this the same as They've done this before, right?
Yeah, this is a result of the Marshall Great Works School course going there for the Veterans Day. And so they've just been really built a great relationship with the Great Works School and
Yeah.
wanted to offer a great donation that will be used by the course. So
That's wonderful.
great opportunity, and just been a great experience for the kids.
Awesome. All right, we never turn down money, so all those in favor. I don't think anybody's ever going to vote no on money. Before we adjourn, does the board have anything?
I would note that the Facebook machine told me today via Vicky Stewart that both of our board reps made honors this past quarter.
Nice, congratulations. That's
It's a
awesome.
criteria.
Absolutely. There's standards to maintain, I think.
Right.
That's wonderful.
Can I just mention one quick thing?
Of course.
I shout out to Dave Gratian. I just on Saturday to talk about an unsung hero of being here the entire day. He was here getting the kids ready for the marching band for the football game, and then he's here until 9 o'clock.
for the
almost
play.
10 o'clock for the play.
Oh,
just
wow.
kind of an unsung
That's
hero who is just kind of here and just putting a lot of time in and doing great things for kids. But just sometimes you don't notice those things, but to see that the hours that man puts in, as a lot of our staff do.
Yeah.
But just thankful for him.
Shout out to the band.
Yeah, they got
The football game and the play.
they got the, and then I saw there was a new banner in the lobby for the band,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
that's wonderful.
Exciting.
Is that a new class of 2023 banner too, or have I
Yes.
just not noticed it before?
That's new this year.
Okay.
First time we've had a class of 2020.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, I guess it is.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
new.
Why is that there? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Oh.
Yeah.
Why not?
Tony or Rob, you think?
Yeah, I'd probably just stay on the track of kind of, what we've been talking about tonight is the data. I'd reach back to the board and say thank you so much for that PD times on Thursdays, because I really see that as the opportunity for us to be able to start this curriculum work and really look at what I think is just phenomenal, progress that we're making. I really do see that across the board. Our teachers are really engaged in curriculum conversations that are unlike what we've ever done before. And I'm talking not just amongst their grade levels and subject areas, but, vertically and horizontally. Heidi talks tonight about Peter Ryan coming to the high school to talk about STAR data because it's working for us. And so let's share that. Let's not keep that, kind of cocooned, we're just, our curriculum has been influenced, our math curriculum was influenced by looking at data and figuring out how our math curriculum wasn't working, and so eventually changing, to illustrated math that we're doing now, and we're really starting to see some nice results of it. But thank you for those opportunities, and these results that we're starting to see is the hard work of our teachers, the hard work, the concentrated work of their efforts, and I just take my hat off to them every day. I mean, they do work hard, and I thank you for providing them the resources and the time. That's a resource, and they are very grateful for that. So I think that would be how I follow up tonight.
And I think I can connect to that theme because our NEASC process officially started yesterday. So I don't know if you're familiar with NEASC, but the reason I say that is when the NEASC liaison, Bill Whirling, was here talking about past NEASC visits, somebody brought up that I think the last NEASC promoted the idea of the late start for professional learning. So I'm just kind of interested in that and there. So I'll just really quickly try to summarize. If you've been to NEASC before, it's pretty intense but valuable. Somewhat ironic in that it's so helpful it can get in the way of your day job. So a NEASC 2-year ramp up can be a real resource, time, energy drain until the revamped NEASC process. So we're really excited with the second or third cohort to do the revamped NEASC process, and it's a self-reflection. There's surveys, there's a comprehensive lens that we look at things through. So we just started it yesterday. We have our accreditation committee, our self-reflection committee started. Bill Worley, our liaison, came, met with those two committees, and met with our staff. So you'll be hearing more about that. But in a nutshell, I think the timing's perfect for us to do a self-reflection. I think the new NEASC process and the language they use, I'll try to get you the cheat sheet. And I think you'll be really excited about what it talks about, the student experience and collegiality and collaboration, and really looking at a curriculum that's individualized and authentic, and et cetera. So I think the timing's perfect. I think the revamped approach, the language they use is what I feel I've been hearing in the last few months of where we need to go. So I'm trying to cobble together a little school board cheat sheet to bring it down to just a few pages to contextualize. And then you'll actually be invited for direct participation in some of the committee work. So.
And Joe, I just wanted to let you know that I am gathering information on that.
I knew that.
Okay, I
Thank
don't
you.
have it all yet, but.
No, you've been busy with other stuff, I can see.
Just a little.
Thank you.
Awesome. Catherine, anything in special ed world?
We're wrapping up, we have a state audit, it's a desk audit, that is coming up and coming due. It's the first part of, they'll take a look at it to see if the state wants to come down to actually look at the whole special ed program. But it really ties in, Heidi and I have had many conversations on data and RTI, and how all of that intertwines with special ed. Because, goals and objectives for special ed have to be data driven and they have to be measurable. So all of that is just really important in terms of what are we doing for the K-12 RTI process, what do those tiers look like, and how are they impacting the special ed? And really, a lot of that information is just really becoming current as I'm going through the desk audit piece. So I was really excited to be part of that team.
Oh, great. All right. If there's nothing else, can I get a motion to adjourn?
I motion we adjourn this meeting.
I guess I'm a second.
All right.
I gotta think about the line of succession.
That's right. All those in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.